This movie was released 20 years ago, but even if you watch it today, it still stands as one of the greatest disaster films ever made. It vividly shows just how small and powerless humans truly are in the face of nature's fury. The story begins at a research station in Antarctica. A team of scientists is drilling into the ice when out of nowhere, the drill suddenly drops. A massive crack appears in the ice and quickly begins to spread. One of Jack's teammates, sensing something's wrong, rushes over and opens the door, only to find the crack has collapsed into a terrifyingly deep trench. He nearly falls in, but Jack and another team member arrive just in time to pull him back from the edge. Unfortunately, the mission's most important ice core sample falls to the other side of the chasm. Without hesitation, Jack risks his life to retrieve it. But as he turns to head back, the ice beneath him suddenly gives way, and he plunges into the void. Hanging by only his climbing axe, Jack dangles between life and death. Thanks to his teammates, he's eventually pulled to safety, but the gaping crack left everyone shaken. Back on solid ground, Jack publishes a report warning of a climate chain reaction. Global warming is melting the polar ice caps, which disrupts the ocean currents that carry warm water to the northern hemisphere. If those currents collapse, temperatures will plummet, leading to a new ice age. It would reset Earth's entire ecosystem, a self-defense mechanism of nature. While this scenario requires specific conditions to happen, Jack warns that if we don't act now, future generations will pay a terrible price. The vice president coldly responds, "What happens to future generations doesn't concern us." Just like that, Jack's plan is dismissed, deemed too costly to consider. No one expected nature's self-defense to strike so soon. At a weather monitoring station in Scotland, a technician notices that ocean temperatures in a specific region have suddenly dropped by 13 degrees Celsius. The change is so dramatic, they think it must be a sensor malfunction. Meanwhile, in Tokyo, a freak storm hits without warning. The government issues an emergency alert, and police are deployed to evacuate people. But before they can act, baseball-sized hailstones rain down from the sky. One strikes a police officer and kills him on the spot, horrifying onlookers. Then come even larger chunks of ice, tennis ball-sized, and for humans, that kind of hail is nothing short of a disaster. Up aboard the International Space Station, astronauts observe ominous, swirling storm clouds forming over the United States. Down below in New York, residents watch flocks of birds fleeing the city, and even the wolves in the zoo begin howling and pacing in agitation. Jack is jolted awake by a phone call from the Scottish Weather Centre. The director tells him they initially thought a sensor had failed due to a temperature drop. But now, 4 different regions across the North Atlantic are showing the same pattern. The odds of simultaneous equipment failure? Almost zero. The director believes the exact thing Jack warned about is already happening. Even Jack finds it hard to believe. According to his calculations, this scenario wasn't supposed to unfold for hundreds of years. While they're still talking, dark storm clouds gather over Los Angeles. Disaster is about to strike. Ink-black clouds twist and boil in the sky. In mere seconds, they connect with hot air rising from the ground and form massive tornadoes. 4 twisters touch down at once. The city descends into chaos. The iconic Hollywood sign is the first to go, ripped from the hillside like paper. Landmarks are shredded by the wind like straw in a hurricane. Some reckless individuals film the spectacle, unaware of just how deadly it truly is. 2 of the tornadoes converge over LAX, forming a monstrous super tornado, something that simply shouldn't exist. Cars are sucked into the sky and fall like rain. A news reporter, desperate to make headlines, broadcasts live from the heart of the storm. But just moments later, a massive billboard is ripped loose and slams into him, killing him instantly. Yet even that isn't the end. The tornadoes continue to merge, creating an ultimate vortex towering and terrifying, a true monster born of nature's wrath. At that moment, in an office building, a group of employees working overtime suddenly felt the entire structure shake violently. A man rushed past the janitor, hurrying back to his office with the intention of getting his girlfriend out of there. But when he pulled back the curtain, the scene outside froze him in place. Peter stood completely stunned, forgetting all about escaping. Meanwhile, the janitor was still mopping the hallway, immersed in his music. It wasn't until he sensed something strange that he opened the door, only to realize he'd narrowly escaped death. The 2 who had just perished would never have imagined that, had they taken just one step back, they might have lived. In the distance, the massive super tornado finally began to die down after tearing through the city. Meanwhile, scientists all over the world were still fiercely debating the cause of the disaster. And the one voice that mattered most was Jack's, the man who had just released a study on global warming. Everything he had warned about was happening far sooner than predicted. Why? Because Jack had missed one critical detail. The ocean's currents depend on a delicate balance between fresh and salt water. Climate change had caused massive melting at the poles, dumping huge amounts of fresh water into the oceans, disrupting that balance. The terrifying super tornadoes were only the beginning. What came next would be beyond anything humanity had imagined. To better predict what was coming, Jack was granted access to a supercomputer to run advanced simulations. After running calculations non-stop for an entire day and night, the results left him speechless. Earth would enter a new ice age in just 6 to 8 weeks. The government quickly arranged a meeting with the vice president, the one in charge of crisis response. However, he still dismissed Jack's warnings and firmly rejected the proposed emergency plans. Elsewhere, 3 helicopters were flying toward the Barmora region on a mission when they suddenly found themselves surrounded by thick storm clouds. Unbeknownst to them, they had flown straight into the eye of a blizzard. The extreme cold instantly froze their fuel lines. One by one, the helicopters lost power and went down. Only one crew member survived the crash. But the moment he opened the hatch, the freezing air turned him into a human ice statue. The abnormal weather patterns were immediately detected by the National Meteorological Institute, and the director sent all the data to Jack. Using his thermal cycle model, Jack quickly pinpointed the cause. Violent storm systems were dragging frigid upper atmosphere air straight down to the surface at incredible speed. Normally, this air would warm as it descended, but the process was happening so fast that it remained deadly cold when it hit the ground. Even more frightening, this wasn't an isolated incident. 2 more superstorms were forming, one over northern Canada and another over Siberia. These 3 extreme cold systems would sweep across the entire northern hemisphere, plunging it into a new ice age. And it was happening much faster than predicted. The entire process might only take a week instead of the 6 to 8 weeks initially calculated. At the same time, a torrential downpour hit New York City. The deluge overwhelmed the city's drainage system, causing widespread flooding. Streets turned into rivers, paralyzing traffic and sending people into a panic. Jack's son, Sam, and his friends were trying to find shelter and ended up heading to the nearest public library. On the way, one of the girls in the group was hit by a car and injured her leg. More and more people poured into the library to escape the rain, unaware that a massive 30-meter-high tsunami was racing toward New York. In mere seconds, the tsunami swallowed a major bridge, sweeping away vehicles like toys. It crashed into skyscrapers with unstoppable force. Against the power of nature, humanity seemed pathetically small. Every effort to resist was meaningless. Only those in elevated areas had any hope of survival, fortunately. Sam and his group managed to reach the top floor of the library just in time and survived. However, all cell phones had lost signal, leaving them completely cut off in a building now surrounded by a sea of water. Sam suddenly remembered an old landline phone that might still work, but it was located in a part of the building that was already submerged. Risking everything, he dove into the icy water to try and contact his father, a climate expert who might know what to do. Miraculously, the phone still worked. When Jack heard his son's voice, he immediately ordered him to stay inside the library and wait for rescue. Under no circumstances should they leave. The next wave of freezing air was coming, and the human body wouldn't be able to survive it. Inside the library, Sam did everything he could to stay warm. Communications were soon cut off again as floodwaters continued to rise. Just as Jack warned, the temperature began to plummet. Soaked to the skin, Sam nearly froze to death, until his girlfriend Laura embraced him, sharing her body heat to save him. Soon after, snow began falling heavily outside. The bitter cold forced everyone inside the library to urgently find ways to stay warm. Suddenly, through the windows, they saw a massive ship drifting through the flooded streets. Submerged buses had been crushed under its weight, and the vessel had come to a halt right beside the library. Meanwhile, Jack was preparing to leave for New York to rescue his son when he was unexpectedly summoned by his superiors for a meeting with the president. At last, the extreme weather in New York had forced the government to take things seriously. Jack presented his full simulation results. In just a few days, the northern hemisphere would be buried in snow and ice due to a massive polar air system. What was happening now was only the beginning. The next cold wave would be even more devastating, and humans were powerless to stop it. Jack's solution was clear: evacuate everyone to the south. The northern regions were already beyond help. Anyone left behind could only barricade themselves indoors and do everything possible to stay warm, their only hope of survival. The president immediately approved the plan. However, the massive wave of refugees heading for Mexico forced the country to close its borders. In a desperate move, the US president agreed to cancel a huge national debt in exchange for safe passage across the Rio Grande. Jack, now fully prepared, set off with his 2 closest friends toward New York to save his son. Just one night later, the city had turned into a frozen wasteland. On the streets, crowds of people scrambled to find shelter, hoping to escape the storm. The library security guard witnessed the chaos and decided to leave with the crowd, believing his chances were better. But Sam, the only one who understood that going outside meant certain death, did everything he could to stop them. Despite his warnings, most still chose to leave. Only a few, along with a Dalmatian dog, stayed behind with Sam. Following his father's advice, Sam began preparing to stay warm. The library had no shortage of books, so he threw a few Bibles into the fireplace to start a fire. An elderly woman protested, saying it was blasphemy. But Sam asked her, "You're about to die. Is God going to save you?" What's more important, the books or our lives? She had no answer. After that, they gathered all the food they could from vending machines. It wasn't much, but Sam believed his father would come in time to rescue them. Meanwhile, Jack's group was forced to abandon their vehicle due to the snowstorm and continue on foot. Snow blanketed everything. The ground was covered up to the 4th floor of buildings. While crossing the glass roof, the structure gave way under their weight, sending their supplies crashing down. Jack barely cut his harness in time to save himself, but the glass couldn't hold both him and his friend. In that critical moment, his friend made the ultimate sacrifice, cutting the rope to save Jack's life. Devastated by the loss, Jack pushed forward with his remaining companion, because his son was still waiting for him in the heart of the storm. But that night in the library, Sam's group faced a dire crisis. Laura, his girlfriend, suddenly developed a high fever and couldn't stand. After checking, they realized her earlier injury had become infected. Without medicine soon, she wouldn't survive. At the same time, astronauts aboard the International Space Station witnessed a sight unlike anything they'd ever seen. 3 massive snowstorms, like giant cotton balls, had nearly engulfed the entire northern hemisphere. An unprecedented disaster in human history was drawing near. Jack and his remaining companion continued their grueling march through the storm, but eventually the companion collapsed, unable to withstand the brutal weather. Meanwhile, back at the library, Sam made a bold decision. He had to save Laura. Along with 2 friends, he left the building and headed for the ship stranded nearby to search for medicine. After a frantic search, not only did they find the antibiotics they needed, but also a good supply of food. However, just as they were about to head back, they came face to face with a pack of wild wolves scavenging for food. Though they managed to temporarily escape, one of Sam's friends was attacked, suffering a serious leg injury and a broken bone. To save him, Sam bravely climbed out a window to distract the wolves, buying time for the others to shut the doors. Once the danger had passed, Sam used an outdoor stairwell to return to the library. Luckily, there was an emergency inflatable raft aboard the ship. The group used it to haul their injured friend, the medicine, and the supplies back to safety. Meanwhile, the heart of the monstrous storm officially made landfall in New York. As Jack trudged through the snow, he sensed something wasn't right. The once falling snow began to slow, and the flag waving high above stood eerily still. Sensing something catastrophic was coming, Jack turned and ran. He knew exactly what this meant. They were standing in the eye of the storm, where temperatures could plummet to deadly levels in mere minutes. Above, ultra-cold cloud layers had blanketed the entire city. In the next instant, the Empire State Building was frozen solid at a speed visible to the naked eye. Jack threw open a rooftop vent, urgently pushed his companion and all their gear inside, and jumped in himself just as the frost overtook everything. He immediately started a fire to stave off the deadly cold. At the same time, that extreme cold front reached the library where Sam and the others were sheltering. Just as they returned, he and his friends had to race down the hallway, dragging their injured companion, with the freezing air chasing behind. In the nick of time, they sealed themselves in a small room, now their only hope of survival. Even with the vents closed, the bitter cold crept in through every crack. The group huddled together, doing everything they could to keep warm through the night of death. Eventually, after the storm passed, Jack's companion woke up from a long, unconscious sleep. Thankfully, he hadn't experienced the nightmare Jack had endured. Without hesitation, the 2 set off again, making their way toward the library, where Sam had taken refuge. The closer they got, the heavier Jack's heart grew. Frozen bodies were scattered along the way, people who had chosen to leave the library during the storm. All of them had frozen to death in the ice and snow. Jack couldn't be sure if Sam was among them, but he kept moving, praying with every step. Back at the International Space Station, after a week of chaos, the astronauts finally observed signs that the megastorm was beginning to subside over the northern hemisphere. As Jack stepped out of his tent, sunlight broke through the sky for the first time in days, casting a golden light over the endless white landscape. They entered New York through the Statue of Liberty, but the once bustling metropolis was now a silent, frozen wasteland, completely buried under snow and ice. Guided by a tracking device, they followed the signal to the library where Sam had last taken shelter. But the building was nearly buried. With all their strength, they dug a path inside. As they went deeper, the sight of frost-covered interiors nearly crushed Jack's hope. But he didn't give up. At last, in the deepest room, a faint light shone through a crack in the door. A tiny glimmer of hope. Jack pushed the door open, and finally, after the long and dangerous journey, he found the person he'd been searching for with all his heart. His son, Sam. After traveling over 300 kilometers through brutal conditions and never losing faith, father and son were miraculously reunited. The government quickly mobilized military forces for a massive rescue operation. Surprisingly, even after facing such an unprecedented natural disaster, many people had managed to survive. At that very moment, the astronauts on the space station witnessed a stunning and surreal sight. Earth, having reset its self-defense system, appeared reborn, glowing with a deep, vibrant blue unlike anything ever seen before. A beauty never before revealed to humankind. The Day After Tomorrow earned its title as the king of disaster movies, not just for its jaw-dropping, end-of-the-world visuals or chillingly realistic weather effects, but for the deeper message it carried: protect the planet. Think about it. How long has it been since we last looked up and truly admired a starry night sky? And how many times have natural disasters grown more frequent and intense in recent years? Let's take action together to protect the environment before it's too late. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to support Dylan Review. And now, goodbye and see you in the next video.